Posted by Enders on June 15, 2009 at 0:16 in English. You're owned. 6 comments. No one can expect the government to hold the citizens of the nation to a higher standard than it holds itself, and yet that is exactly what the current administration is doing. When individuals take precautionary measures and their government does not, i.e., closing the borders, etc., forced inoculations in the face of open borders and unrestricted air travel, fly in the face of reason, quarantining towns and cities and injecting someone without consent must be viewed as a more severe response than a simple restriction of international or interstate travel. Injection of an untested substance into one's body, without consent, is a violation of the sanctity of life upon which all of our laws are based, and in mechanics and effect, is tantamount to rape. Were it not the government performing such a mass, forced inoculation, then the perpetrator would surely face assault charges, if not for unlawful imprisonment, abduction, and mutilation, and possibly even murder or mass murder. In addition, Army criminal investigators are looking into the possibility that disease samples are missing from biolabs at Fort Detrick, the same Army research lab from which the 2001 anthrax strain was released, according to a recent article in the Frederick News Post. 13 in February, the top biodefense lab halted all its research into Ebola, anthrax, plague, and other diseases known as select agents, after they discovered virus samples that weren't listed in its inventory and might have been switched with something else. According to a report in the Washington Post, there will be no investigation. An inventory of potentially deadly pathogens at Fort Detrick's infectious disease laboratory found more than 9,000 vials that had not been accounted for, Army officials said yesterday, raising concerns that officials wouldn't know whether dangerous toxins were missing. After 4 months of searching about 335 freezers and refrigerators at the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases in Frederick, investigators found 9,220 samples that hadn't been included in a database of about 66,000 items listed as of February, said Col. Mark Cortepeter, the Institute's deputy commander. The vials contained some dangerous pathogens, among them the Ebola virus, anthrax bacteria and botulinum toxin, and less lethal agents such as Venezuelan equine encephalitis virus and the bacterium that causes tularemia. Most of them, forgotten inside freezer drawers, hadn't been used in years or even decades. Officials said some serum samples from hemorrhagic fever patients dated to the Korean War. Cortepeter likened the inventory to cleaning out the attic and said he knew of no plans for an investigation into how the vials had been left out of the database. The vast majority of these samples were working stock that were accumulated over decades, he said, left there by scientists who had retired or left the institute.
Yeah, right. Just 9,000 missing. It's just like $9,000 trillion the Fed lost, and another 40 trillion in undocumented loans, and American people say nothing. Then what was it? The Pentagon lost 65 trillion, or was it 65 billion? And they refuse to even rebuild disaster victims' homes here in America for free, which we have been advocating for several years now with very little support. But if we can give billions to a terrorist state like Israel, and we could pay for them building their wall, and to build illegal settlements and kill Palestinians, and the Pentagon can lose $65 trillion, and the Federal Reserve $49 trillion in total, we certainly can afford to build a few thousand homes for free for the disaster victims, and actually build even homes for the homeless. I mean, just think of where all those trillions of dollars could go. I mean, to the American people. And it is our money. And we should have a say to where it goes. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, remember FEMA lost $65 million a few years back. Was that the Katrina disaster or something? I know Feinstein was involved in that, and I think somebody played the anti-Semitic card again. Aren't we tired of that anti-Semitic card?
84. XX. Evidence as to manipulation of the legal framework to allow mass murder with impunity. President Obama and his predecessor President George Bush have introduced legislation and executive orders that have stripped the civic rights of the people of the United States, specifically by criminalizing their right to refuse a swine flu or other pandemic virus vaccine, and so paved the way for the implementation of a program of mass murder by means of a virus and vaccine, while giving themselves and their agents immunity. The Project BioShield Act of 2004, S. 15, became law on July 21, 2004, to provide protections and countermeasures against chemical, radiological, or nuclear agents that may be used in a terrorist attack against the United States by giving the National Institutes of Health contracting flexibility, infrastructure improvements, and expediting the scientific peer review process, and streamlining the Food and Drug Administration approval process of countermeasures. In other words, the FDA may now recklessly approve inadequately tested, potentially dangerous vaccines and other drugs if ever the Secretaries of Health and Human Services, HHS, or Defense, DoD, declare a national emergency, whether or not one exists and regardless of whether treatments available are safe and effective. The Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness PrEP Act slipped under the radar when George Bush signed it into law as part of the 2006 Defense Appropriations Act, H.R. 2863. It lets the HHS Secretary declare any disease an epidemic or national emergency requiring mandatory vaccinations. Nothing in the Act lists criteria that warrant a threat. Also, potential penalties aren't specified for those who balk, but very likely they'd include quarantine and possible fines. The HHS website also says the Secretary may issue a declaration that provides immunity from tort liability, except for willful misconduct, for claims of loss caused, arising out of, relating to, or resulting from administration or use of vaccine or other pharmaceutical countermeasures to diseases, threats and conditions determined by the Secretary to constitute a present, or credible, risk of a future public health emergency. The industry-run U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, notoriously rushes inadequately tested drugs to market, putting their efficacy and safety into question, and turning those who use them into lab rats. It includes everyone if a mass vaccination is ordered on the mere claim of a public emergency, no proof required. The Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act, S. 3678, is the other worrisome law, effective December 19, 2006. It amended the Public Health Service Act with respect to public health, security and all hazards preparedness and response, and for other purposes. Even its supporters worry about issues of privacy, liability, and putting profits over public health. Critics express greater concerns about dangerous remedies for exaggerated or non-existent threats as well as mass hysteria created for political purposes. The Model State Emergency Health Powers Act, MSEHPA, has been criticized heavily. On its website, the ACLU says this about MSEHPA: it's written in a way that doesn't adequately protect citizens against the misuse of the tremendous powers that it would grant in an emergency. It's replete with civil liberties problems. Its three top flaws are that.
Yeah, so we got the chemtrails making people weak and compromising their immune system and also making people sick. We got monster foods breaking down our DNA and RNA. We got T-valves that we have to worry about, that they're going to poison our water at any time they feel like it, or make us sick with some kind of disease, once again to weaken the immune system. And here come the vaccines. I mean, if you wanted to ensure your mission is going to be successful on killing however many they feel like killing at the time, whether it's 80% or 50% or 40%, it's still, we're talking millions and millions of people. And throughout the world, it's billions. That's how you would accomplish your mission, just to make sure that the outcome is death and not just a long-term illness. Something to think about. It's like a military-run operation. Something went wrong now. It's not working. I don't know what's wrong now. For crying out fucking loud.